Ninjago continues to prove why it's a fantastic show, and throughout all of the different seasons, we get a lot of bits of information and a lot of different things to theorize on because they don't like to give us all the answers, because a thinking point is ultimately what also makes a show good. And it leads to the amazing concept of headcanons, and I've gone out of my way to talk about headcanons on the show, because it's one of my favourite things, and you guys have some absolutely brilliant ideas on what we can and can't see throughout the course of the show. So today on the Weavy channel, we will continue to talk about your guys' headcanons, and we will go through all the ones that you've commented on the previous video. And if you have any headcanons, or if I missed yours, feel free to comment it down below, and I will continue to talk about them as long as you want them. But let me not waste any more of your time, and let's talk about some headcanons. The first one comes from Jules Studios. Hello my friend, and you said Masako originally planned on leaving Lloyd with Ray and Maya, but before she could, Crux kidnapped them. And honestly, as a lot of people have also replied to you with, this is absolutely fantastic. I think the concept, honestly, of Masako leaving Lloyd, a Darkly's boarding school for bad boys, was really weird to actually put it simply. The thing is that it never really made much sense because she actively wanted to put Lloyd somewhere that was for bad children. And the fact is that there was never an implication that he was bad to begin with. But she placed him there for seemingly no reason. And honestly, given the explanation of Masako originally planned to put him elsewhere, really does make more sense. And where better than to put him than with other elemental masters that she actually trusts. It really does bring up this interesting hypothetical of what if the RGB siblings were actually all together from the very beginning, and honestly it does just continue to make things more interesting because it does lead to further implications that you could honestly think about. Such as, how would Lloyd have been when the Skulkin attacked 4 weapons? How could things have gone out if Ray and Maya were never kidnapped? Would Lloyd have known he was the Green Ninja beforehand? Would he maybe have had better training? Would he have been better at the beginning points? Who really knows? Would the Serpentine have been released? There's so many implications with it, and honestly, this very small detail not only makes a lot of sense, also has a lot of interesting implications for a hypothetical what if. But yeah, I absolutely love this one. I think, honestly, this possibly makes the most sense considering. Honestly, it does extend the question of why didn't she speak to other elemental masters about taking in Lloyd, but I ultimately think Misako was probably the closest to Ray and Maya because we also know that Wu was very close to Ray and Maya because they entrusted him with the map. So honestly, I really like this one. I kind of would consider this canon by all accounts, such as Danger Buff Rocky actually put in the comments below with you. So yeah, I absolutely love this one. I'm really appreciative for that one. This honestly is now officially my headcanon. Headcanon 2 comes from Lava Forever. Hello my friend, and you said, my headcanon is that Jay has a ponytail because deep in his subconscious he remembers his main villains, who all had ponytails, so he connects those kinds of ponytails to being evil. And honestly, I again really like this implication. This, funnily enough, is actually a part of a video I have coming up about Jay, which talks about the implication of his memory loss, and this was one of the things I actually bring up, because like you said, subconsciously, he clearly seems to be remembering some things, like you said, the main villains having ponytails, because the 2 main villains that he faces, which is Unagami and Narukon, it's one of those ones where both of them actually do have ponytails, and I mean, Unagami in particular has an identical one. So it kind of does give that implication that Jay seems to associate ponytails at the very least with being villainous, or at the very least not being good, because the ambiguous nature of Jay's kind of stand-in is kind of weird to begin with, but again, that is for a later video. But I do think you're onto something with this, because I was onto the exact same threads, and I honestly think to an extent, Jay does seem to be remembering things in some way, because, like you said, all his main villains do have those ponytails, so it kind of makes sense as someone who's clearly trying to find his place in the world, because Rogue has gone rogue, you know, as his name suggests, and he's just trying to figure things out. So if he is trying to do that, maybe he's just pulling on memories that he can think of, and one of those is the ponytail. But thank you, Lava Forever, this was really good. Number 3 comes from E443 Productions 9. Hello, my friend. And you said your headcanon is that Zane does feel taste and appreciates good food, but he was just being nice to Sora in the later season about her bad pies. He has been shown eating and cooking quite a few times in the show, and it makes no sense for him to not taste anything. In one of the previous seasons, he's also shown to be kind of grossed out by Mr. Frohicke's food, and says something like, "Oh, ninjoids don't even need to eat," which might be true, but it's pretty clear that he's been using it as an excuse to not try the gross looking things that he was offered. And again, I really think you're onto something here. This leads into the whole thing of how did Zane go so far in life without realizing he was a ninjoid, and of course all the basic mechanics of a human being he had to do at some point. And of course he's a very advanced ninjoid. We know that for a fact because of course we get to see Pixel, the Overlord, all take the schematic of Zane to build the ninjoid army. So he was clearly much more advanced in a lot of different ways. I mean, they can invent flying cars, but they can't invent Zane. So I do think to an extent, Zane was highly sophisticated. And honestly, I do think when Dr. Julian did make Zane, he did program in those actual human-like resemblances. And I do think to an extent, he does have all of those senses. It makes complete sense for Zane to have gone through life being able to taste and appreciate good food. How Zane processes it is a whole different thing. But by all accounts, it does seem to be that Zane does have a fully functional set of human anatomy. It's an emulated ninjoid version, but he was good enough to where he never actually realized. So, I do think you're telling the truth. I do think Zane does taste and appreciates good food. I mean, if anyone can appreciate good food, it probably would be Zane. And like you said, he probably was just being nice to Sora in that moment. So yeah, I really like this one. Thank you very much. Again, this is becoming my headcanon. Headcanon 4 comes from Iron Emperor 4575. Hello, my friend. And you said your headcanon is that the Overlord knows about the Source Dragons, so he made his true form of dragon not only as a mockery to the Source Dragon themselves, but also a mockery of the first Ninjitsu Master, who was a conduit to the Source Dragons. And again, in similar vein to one of the previous ones, this is actually something I've got coming up in a video. So of course the whole thing of the Overlord's true form being a dragon is very interesting now in modern day Ninjago, because of course you know of the Oni and we know of the dragon, and we know that the dragon typically aren't associated with evil. Of course there are evil dragons, but not always. They're actually quite rare, surprisingly. But the thing is that ultimately the Overlord did become an evil dragon, and the claim is that it is his true form. So how do we explain that away? Funnily enough, this is coming up in a video I have about the Overlord, but my summary of this is actually quite similar to you. I do think to an extent the Overlord's true form was not originally a dragon, but the fact is that the Overlord has had multiple different forms throughout the course of the show, so I don't think a true form necessarily exists when it comes to the Overlord, and I do think the dragon form that he does take a part of himself is actually to do with the Source Dragons, but there is also one other thing I'd like to say about it. And that is the fact, I do like to think that the Overlord was able to take the form of a dragon, not only as a mockery of the Source Dragons, of the first Ninjitsu Master, of all those different aspects, I also think he was able to become a dragon because he did actually inhabit the body of Garmadon, who is also part dragon. I think to an extent that the Overlord did want the form of a dragon. I would also make the argument that the Overlord probably also wanted to be a Source Dragon in similar vein to Thunderfang, but the fact is that he simply couldn't, and when he took the form of Garmadon, he was able to become a dragon because of it, because a true form doesn't necessarily mean it is his actual form or his original form. Of course that is the claim of Masako, but Masako ultimately doesn't have the entire encyclopedia knowledge that the Overlord actually does have. The fact is that if there is a claim that it's his true form, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is actually the truth. And I do think to an extent it wasn't, and it was also just a byproduct of the Source Dragon and of Garmadon. But I do like your theory about a mockery as well, and I do think that kind of plays into the video in of itself. But yeah, I like this one. I do like the idea that it was just the Overlord attempting to be the Overlord like he does. But I do think there's more to it than a simple mockery. But again, I do like to think that's actually a part of it. So yeah, thank you very much, my friend. The fifth headcanon, or the second to last one, I mean typically I only do 5, but there were 6 here that I really wanted to touch on. But this one comes from John42181, and you said, Narukon only let Jay's last wish count because he knew he had failed. He saw Nia dying and thought of his love and chose to let Jay go back in time, since that's what he would have wanted himself. He would have wanted to go back and live his life with Delara, but he couldn't before she died. And ultimately, I completely agree with this one. I mean, personally speaking, after my video about wish magic and the implications of Jin magic, I've been thinking more and more about the implications of Jin magic. And not only do I stand behind my beliefs that Narukon was simply lying about the rules, I do think this is something that played into it. I do think to an extent, Narukon had a choice on whether or not he could grant wishes, and there is plenty of evidence to back that up. If you want to see more of it in depth, definitely check out my wish magic video. But this one is a part of it. Honestly, this whole reasoning, because I think Narukon let Jay have that wish, and I think I even touched on that in the video itself. So I do think he knew he had failed, and I do think Narukon did realize that ultimately it was either grant the wish or die, or see Nia die at the very least. He knew he had failed, and he knew that there was no going back from that point. So I do think he let Jay have the wish. I completely agree with you, John. So thank you very much, my friend, and I'm glad to know that we are on the same page. And the final ones for today comes from the Extra Crispy Colonel. I fair play on the name, and hello, my friend. Your first one is, those 2 skeletons that tried to kidnap Sora were going to take it to the Shintara mines, because someone has started up the Vengestone mine operation in secret. And honestly, I can actually see this one. I mean, the fact is that after the events have crystallized, I mean, Vengestone seemingly has become a lot more difficult to come by. The fact is that we've only seen Vengestone in very small quantities since it crystallized itself. And that's because, by the looks of it, Harumi bought up literally all of it. So I do think, to an extent, there is a need for Vengestone once again, because there's people who ultimately want to go after the ninja, and I'm assuming there are also other uses for Vengestone, but that's something that hasn't really been covered. But I would honestly say there is a good chance that someone is probably using those Shintaro mines for that exact reason. The only thing that kind of just goes against all of it, and this is kind of just a problem with this whole scene in general, is that if those are in fact reawakened skeletons, there needs to be something that's now activating those skeletons again, because the skull was actually destroyed. So it would need an explanation as to how they're able to be reawakened again, but ultimately, if they can figure that out, it wouldn't surprise me if someone is also in those mines. So I do like this one. And the second one is Zane's visions up to and in the Fire chapter are due to some complication from him being sent decades into the Netherrealm's past at the end of the Fire chapter. And honestly, I kind of do get this, and I do have a really weird explanation as to why. For me, I do think it comes down to the fact that it has been confirmed that Zane was in fact sent back in time, and I do think it's an interesting implication, because that does mean, by all accounts, there are 2 different versions of Zane at one given time. It means that there is a version of Zane in the Netherrealm, and there's a version of him in actual Ninjago itself. So I do think there's an interesting thing to believe, that what if those 2 versions of Zane are able to link up with each other because they are Ninjroids. I do think it's an interesting way of looking at it, and an interesting way to explain the visions, because that actually can kind of explain all of the visions that we actually get for Zane. I mean, if Zane was truly sent back as far as they've believed, I mean, the whole thing is that he was sent back decades, I mean, that completely encompasses all of the time of the show itself. So, throughout all of Ninjago, there was presumably a Zane in the Netherrealm. So, it could honestly explain all of Zane's visions and give a reasonable explanation for all of it. But honestly, I really like this one as well, and this is possibly the one I want to know your guys' opinion on the most. So thank you, Extra Crispy. These are actually some really good ones to think about. But those are all of the headcanons that I want to talk about for today, and honestly, there were so many more in this comment section that I wish I could have more time to talk about. But ultimately, I can't just sit here and spend hours talking about headcanons, because that would probably be a bit boring. But ultimately, if you guys want to see more of them, I am more than happy to do so. Because like I said, there were so many in this comment section. There were a ton about Nia and Jay, there were some about Skylar, there were some about the golden weapons. There were tons in there, and I do want to make more of these videos, so let me know if you want to. And like I said, comment your ones down below, and also comment whether or not you agree with the ones I've talked about today, because I do think there's some very interesting thoughts in these comments from everyone that have been on the video. So thank you everyone who has commented, and thank you to everyone who is commenting in general, because I did read through all of them, and all of them are fantastic. But that is about it for today, you guys. Thank you very much for watching, and like I said, let me know what you think, because these are possibly the biggest talking points of my channel. I mean, the Weavy channel does a lot of different things, but ultimately I think these discussion pieces are what makes it very fun. But yeah, let me know what you think, and again, thank you very much for watching. Take care. Okay,